What should my next video be about? Oh, wait. I got it. I'm a millennial. That means I can't make choices. That's a perfect idea for a video. Hello, my fellow monks, and welcome back to the video with the monkey something sensei. And if you couldn't tell by that little intro skit, I will be talking about my top 5 albums that I reach for in my collection when I cannot make a decision on what I want to listen to. Starting out with number 5, I didn't put these albums in any particular order besides alphabetically, so they are chronological in that way, but I didn't put them in any level of favoritism. I did do a video on all these albums, sans one, so if you want to hear more deeper thoughts, where I go more in-depth about each record, I'm going to leave a link below for each of the albums that I discussed. So without further ado, I'm going to get into my number 5, and this is an album that no matter what mood I'm in, I can just put on the turntable, and it's a hard rock and kick-ass album, and I'm of course talking about Aerosmith's Toys in the Attic all the way back in 1975. Now, what can be said about this record? You have songs like Toys in the Attic, hard rockin' opener, Adam's Apple, Uncle Salty, big hits like Walk This Way, the cover of Big Tendon's record, Sweet Emotion, Round and Round, one of the first really heavy, grungy songs of the time, and You See Me Crying, an excellent ballad. This album, this is a landmark record for the 70s, and I'd recommend anyone who really likes hard rock to check this record out. Moving on from that record, going from the 70s, we're going into the 60s. Probably the most important band in rock and roll history, and that is, of course, the Beatles. But which album did I pick? Well, I had to go with the album that changed 60s music forever. And of course, I'm talking about Revolver, another album that does not need any kind of introduction. You have tracks on here like Taxman, my personal favorite Beatles song, and my favorite George Harrison song. And that's tough because he has a lot of great songs like Something and Here Comes the Sun from Abbey Road. But Taxman's a classic. Eleanor Rigby, another song that changed everything. David Crosby, cite that as a huge influence. John's I'm Only Sleeping. Love You Too, one of George's first instances of using the sitar. Yellow Submarine, one of Ringo's more kid-friendly fun songs. She Said, She Said. Good Day Sunshine. For No One, one of Paul's best ballads on here. Dr. Robert, a great short number that harkens back to the Beatles' early sound. Got to Get You Into My Life. And Tomorrow Never Knows. This is the song that changed everything. And this is the song that really drove the later 60s into high gear, along with Jimi Hendrix's Are You Experienced. But those two albums pretty much, and Cream as well, really helped kickstart the later 60s. But this album as a whole is the best blend of the early Beatles pop rock that they had done up to this point, but with more studio time and more experimentation. So to me, this album is the best of both worlds. As much as I love Sgt. Pepper, I mean, I got the band right there in the background. As much as I love Sgt. Pepper, this is my go-to Beatles record, just because I love that early Beatles sound, so having that mixed with a little bit of studio magic and experimentation is just a perfect world for me. And keep it on with the 60s, an album that came out just 2 years later, in fact. I actually just talked about this record on my channel not too long ago. I think it was about a video or two ago I discussed this album. One of my personal favorites from the 60s. We're coming from something that's experimental and kind of heady in a way, to just a basic, great Southern rock, bayou, dirty kind of album about Green River from Creedence Clearwater Revival. And this, I believe, was 1969. Yeah, 1969. This was actually the third record they released in that time. And in my video, I discussed how amazing John Fogerty was as an artist and just as a frontman in general. And this album, again, one thing I love about this album is just, it's another transitionary album, kind of like Revolver, where you have a lot of bluesy numbers on here that CCR would have done on the first album and on Bayou Country. But then you have some more of their staple sound starting to creep in here. You have songs like Green River that are that really deep-rooted Southern sound, and songs like Commotion and Bad Moon Rising and Lodi that are more really showcasing Creedence moving into a different style. Like, there's still bluesy songs on here, like Tombstone Shadow, one of my personal favorites, and Sinister Purpose, but they really start to expand their sound and their musical palette past the blues on this record. Going from the first album, the debut, to Bayou Country to this is a huge leap forward, in my opinion. And this is really the Creedence album to reach for if you want a general idea of what Creedence sounds like. If you don't want to listen to the greatest hits and you want something a little bit more shorter and concise, this is about a half an hour long. I would pull this record out any day. If you want bluesy CCR, I'd pull out the first record. It's always a toss-up between the first one and this one, which one's my favorite. But I would say overall, this is the best CCR album and the go-to album for me. Jumping from the 60s to the 80s with this release. This one might shock a lot of people because this is my favorite band of all time. But I don't listen to their albums that often on vinyl because it's one of those things where I love the band so much, I don't want to put their albums on the turntable and listen to them all the time because then I feel like the magic will be lost. So when I listen to this particular band, I usually only listen to a few records at a time. And the one I usually pull out is this masterpiece. And this is one that might not be too high on people's list, but it's one of my personal favorites. And that is Rush with Grace Under Pressure all the way back in 1984. Yeah, I'm just going to go with 1984. This is the 2015 version. That's on 180 gram. Actually, no, this is 200 gram vinyl right here. But this album is fantastic. Another one I put in. I didn't talk about this album by itself yet. I put it in my top 5 underrated Rush albums. And I believe I talked about it when I did my vinyl collection. But this album is so amazing. This is Rush really going deep into that synthwave period. Where Rush were in their police worshipping phase. So you still have a lot of bouncy songs like Kid Gloves and The Body Electric and Enemy Within, my personal favorite on here. This album also showcases the darker side of Rush with songs like Distant Early Warning, After Image, Red Sector A, Between the Wheels. Might be my second song on here. It's tied with that and The Enemy Within. But Between the Wheels is this dark, heavy, foreboding track. And this whole album was written around the Cold War, the mid-'80s. So this album has a huge Cold War vibe with it. And it's just a masterpiece from front to back. And if you are a Rush fan and you're not a fan of the mid to late 80s period because of there being too many synths and it's kind of bloated with synths and electronica, I'd give this another shot because this is a great album. And it's definitely one that has aged the best, maybe minus Signals, out of the whole 80s synthwave era. Before I get to my last record, I want to point out that my Revolver here, this is the 2022 remix that was done by Sam O'Kell and Giles Martin. Great sounding copy. And then my Creedence is the 2019 half-speed master done at Abbey Road. So I wanted to point that out. In case you want to buy any of these albums, then you'll know which pressings to buy because I think they sound excellent. And the Grace Under Pressure is the 2015 Mercury reissues that are 180 gram. Mine's 200 gram. Mine is actually a first wave of that reissue. When they reissued them, again, in 2019, they made them all 180 gram. But I was able to snag a few 200 grams before they were gone. Now, for this last one, this record, I did do a perfect Zen on it, but I don't know if I went into enough detail. This album literally changed, one of the albums that literally changed my life as a music fan. This is an album that I would listen to when I wanted to listen to an album, but I didn't want to listen to something that's like too long or too heady, but it just rocks. There's some punk, there's some metal influence, a little bit of everything. And I do go into detail more in my Perfect Zen video, but this is one of those records where, oh boy, even if you don't like modern music and modern production, I would still check it out because these guys were able to outgrow their pop punk sound. A lot of people would call this band a Blink-182 ripoff and, you know, they're just juvenile pop punk, but these guys were able to escape that sound and still make kick-ass music well into their career. And the last 2 records were fantastic as well. I'd recommend checking them out. And I'm talking about Canada's own Sum 41. Does this look infected? I mean, I had to put this in a video. Any chance I get to talk about this masterpiece, I'm going to talk about it. Because this record, man, it's only about 32 minutes, but it's 32 minutes of bliss. Just starting off with the Hell song. And that going into Over My Head with those heavy metallic punk riffs. I don't know how they did it, but they're able to blend pop punk and metal together in a way that not many bands can do. Even Sum 41, they went into a more heavier direction with their next album, Chuck. Went too far in the metal, in my opinion. That's still a great album, but they, in my opinion, they have never made an album as good as this since. Their last 2 have been fantastic, but there has never been a Sum record as good as this. And I love this cover. This is a really cool lenticular cover. As you can see, It's kind of khaki green. I didn't show you the vinyl for those other ones, but in case you didn't watch my video on this one, my Perfect Zen, I want to show you the vinyl because it is perfect. Now, it's not as light as the sticker shows. It's you can kind of see it here. It's darker. It's a darker khaki, you know? It's like if you walk in the mud for too long, khaki, and you don't wash them for a while. Yeah, look at how beautiful this looks. Now, the label of this says Aquarius on the center label here. I don't know where that is. They must be based out of Canada, I'm thinking. My dad and I used to go every weekend to Newberry Comics, and I'd get money from him, and I'd buy 2 or 3 CDs a week. And then before or after, we'd go to Pizza Hut and get pizza and breadsticks. I remember that every week. I was a fat-ass kid. I used to love pizza and breadsticks. Still do, you can tell. All the photos here, they're going for this zombie theme of the record. Of course, with the album cover, magical. It's perfect. This shows their older releases. Those, as you can see, those first 2 records, those are the more pop-punky type records. Like the Blink-182 style albums. You're not going to see this, but it took me about 5 minutes to put this back in the sleeve. There's just so much stuff that you have to kind of cram it in there. And then when you put it back in the sleeve, you have to make sure you're careful or it's going to tear up these outer sleeves. But you get such a good value with this record. If it's still on Amazon for a decent price, I doubt it now. But if it is, I'll leave a link for it down below. And I'll leave a link to my review down below as well, because I go in depth about how much I love this record. And there are different versions of this too. I believe there's like 3 different colors you can pick. It's kind of the same deal. I think the one that I bought was actually the muddier version of this one. So they might have gotten swapped while they were manufacturing, I'm not sure. A lot of time with vinyl, and I might go into this deeper in another video, but the thing is about 90s and 2000s and basically anything after that, modern vinyl, is that most of the time these companies, especially with the vinyl resurgence, these companies see dollar signs and say, oh look, Harry Styles' new album, you know, let's put it on vinyl because vinyl is big right now. But what they end up doing is they don't, because they want to take as much money as possible, they don't put the time necessary to actually master the album for vinyl. So what you get is a CD on vinyl or an MP3 on vinyl, and that's not how vinyl is meant to sound. It's meant to be an analog experience. Even if you use a digital source, there's still a way to make an album sound good and clean for vinyl without it sounding compressed and just messy. Nowadays, I'm a little smarter with my vinyl purchases. I actually do research and I look up reviews and videos and just, I do a lot of research before I buy a record so I don't have to return it or do that whole necessary baloney to get an album and have to return everything else. But when it comes to 90s albums and forward, hell, even albums that were out in the 70s and 80s that were mastered poorly for vinyl, it just depends. You have to be careful out there. But when it comes to an album like this, I had to get this pressing just because of how classic this album is. It's a modern day masterpiece, which actually this album is 20 years old now. I should have filmed my video on the 20th anniversary. I'm not sure the exact date this came out, but anyway, I'm rambling on. Great album, one of my favorites of all time. This got me into music, and it's one of those albums that turned me into the person I am today. And if I talk about this album again, I'm sure people are going to unsubscribe because they're probably getting sick of it. Alright, that's going to do it for me, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below. What do you guys' go-to album? Whether you listen to CD, vinyl, Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music, anything. Let me know albums that you listen to when you don't know what to listen to. Or do you just put your songs on shuffle and go on with your merry day? If you can, give the video a like. Subscribe to the channel for more swinging content. Hit that notification bell so you know when I upload a new video to the channel. And don't forget, listen to Rush. And also, you can't forget to keep meditating with vinyl.